So let's turn our attentions to Manchester United now with Adam and Laurie. It's a very strange feeling seeing you smile a lot on these podcasts, Laurie. I'm not used to it. Really. Mind you, I suppose I could argue it's very strange to see me smiling on these podcasts as well.
Well, you've had a great weekend, haven't you, chappers? I enjoyed your repartee on the sidelines of Wembley. Very good. In fact, that's actually what I was just watching. So that's why I was smiling so much. I was doing my preparation for this podcast I was obviously there, so I didn't see the TV
That's how you
show.
get appearances, Adam, by being polite and buttering up the host.
Well, it was mainly
sorry. I was a bit busy watching the highlights of the game back, and he was just watching the highlights of the host to butter you up.
And to be honest, it was mainly Roy Keane that was making me laugh. So there we are. But no, generally, it was a really good occasion. And Erik ten Hag is funny. We've established, he's this disciplinarian. He's this guy with strict rules and standards. But he forgot the Carabao Cup at the end of his press conference, and we had to remind him, Erik, you've left the trophy, and he basically said, "Don't worry, there'll be more coming along soon."
but because of that. And this is where we'll start then. And I did mention it yesterday. He's authentic, isn't he? He's genuine. What you see is what you get. And so often in this industry, there are so many smoke and mirrors and people trying to be someone that they're not, and so on and so forth. And I'm talking about it from a player's point of view as well. Look, he will be nice to you. He'll have a dance with you. He'll put his arm around you, but he'll also discipline you and kick you out for whatever misdemeanor you've committed. He's genuine.
He backs up what he says. So if he tells players that they've got to be at a team meeting at a certain time and they're not, I don't know exactly how many times maybe there's been lateness, but there's clearly a line where he says, right, that's it, you're out the team. And in the piece today that I've written, Marcus Rashford was dropped for that Wolves game. It was the morning of the game. The kickoff was 12:30 and it was the last team meeting that United had in that morning, and he overslept and he wasn't there, and ten Hag switched him out. It was very tight turnaround, so he could easily have kind of gone, okay, I'll because it's such a tight squeeze, I'll let this one slide, but he didn't. And I think that then provides the players with a clear blueprint for how they should conduct themselves, both off the pitch but also on the pitch. That's primarily where we're talking here, in that if he asks players to back up their teammates with a certain run or make those kind of tackles, act a certain way, dropping deep perhaps, do it. There's a consequence if you don't do it, and there's a reason why I'm asking you to do it. It's for the betterment, and the silverware aids that massively. That gets buy-in from players, because if they're, and Gary Neville I think touched on it in your panel yesterday, but that at the start of the season, if you've come in with such a kind of hard rod, and he did, he cancelled the players' day off after that Brentford game and made them do running and did it with them, but that's still, it could piss players off, and dropping players. It certainly did with Cristiano Ronaldo. That was a part of the ways. There we go. That was his line in the sand. But if you start getting results and if you start winning trophies, then players are more likely to go, okay, I can see where he's coming from here and get on board.
Adam just turned part of that into a carry-on film. Then I could see. Moving quickly on. Look, it's not just personality and how he is as a person. Tactically, there are very few errors from him at the moment, Adam, including substitutions.
Yeah, I think there has been a bit of a change since the World Cup as well. It feels like, and so we know what happened during the World Cup, which is that Ronaldo left. And I think since then, it's just like Ten Hag has just gone from strength to strength in decision-making, in setup, in authority, in credibility with the rest of the squad. I mean, the Rashford thing, against Wolves, I think reinforced that again. I thought his setup yesterday was really sensible. I think Man United yesterday basically deceived Newcastle into thinking they were playing really well. Give you lots of the ball, you have loads of the play. Aren't we doing well at Wembley? And then 2 moments, game over. The game was basically over at half time, because United now have the ability, with that little spine at the back of De Gea and Varane and Martinez and Casemiro, to shut a game down. And you're almost watching it as a Manchester United fan, still a bit nervous because of what you've seen over the past few years. But actually, when you watch those guys play, those three in particular, right at the heart, almost at the heart of the defence. That result was never in doubt really from the moment United scored the first goal, and I think that's been the huge change, that he's now got players that he can really trust all over the team.
I wonder, just on the Ronaldo thing, and then we will leave it. I wonder on the Ronaldo thing that there's one element of, and the assumption is the players then realise who is in charge by him doing that. I also wonder, with both of you, Adam, you may want to go first here, whether actually the players also realised, actually, you're on our side here. You know, you are on us as a group rather than that one individual.
Yeah, or you're on the side of the club, the side of, you know, the team trying to win, and we're all trying to succeed here. Look, I think the reality with Ronaldo is that, you know, some players liked him, some players respected him but didn't love working with him. Other players didn't have that much time for him by the end of it. But I think everyone recognised that the situation of having a player of that reputation and that scale sat on the bench or coming on for 10 minutes here or there, or not being brought on because it would be disrespectful to be brought on. I mean, do you remember all those ridiculous conversations we were having to have at the time? Everyone could see that wasn't really working. So go with players that are desperate to be there. And that's, you know, look, I've been on this podcast and been neggy about Weghorst, to quote Laurie. And, you know, yesterday was probably 7 out of 10 instead of 5 out of 10. But the fact is, he really wants to be there. And you can tell that the players like the fact that he really wants to be there and that he's buying into what they're doing. And just on Ten Hag, what I really like about him is he's overseeing this cultural reset without ever mentioning the word culture. I don't think.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you hear so many people talk about culture and high performance and all this sort of stuff. He's just been, as you say, he's been honest and he's been direct. And he makes complicated things sound really, really obvious sometimes. You know, you might ask him in a press conference, Laurie, why is Dalot almost in central midfield half the time? He'll give you an explanation where you're like, yeah, that makes total sense. But it's not something that me or you would instinctively see. Maybe you would.
Well, no, definitely not. I mean, and he's not aloof from it as well, actually. He's not. He is clearly a very smart, erudite guy, particularly when it comes to football, but he doesn't, you know, preach from an ivory tower. He kind of comes down to your level and says, yeah, okay, that's a fair question. I'll answer it.
But that was the great thing about Louis van Gaal, who you would ask him a question about an issue between players or between him and a player, and he would say, stop wasting my time with silly questions. And then you would ask him for a tactical explanation and he would say, well, you wouldn't understand. So you actually couldn't ask Louis van Gaal anything by the end.
Just a quick one on Wout Weghorst. That's his first trophy in his whole career. So you talk about sort of wanting to be somewhere, and okay, yeah, he's obviously not at the absolute standard of Manchester United, but is there a role for him? Certainly this season there is, because Anthony Martial's just still injured. But even, you know, potentially beyond that, I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but that kind of sort of moment for a player means a lot. So you think, right, whatever Ten Hag asks him to do from now on, he's going to get that devotion. And yeah, he doesn't say culture. He does have other words, you know, standards, principles. He's very hard with that. And I think what you're saying about the way he talks in press conferences is economical with his language. He doesn't waffle. And I think that's what he's like actually just in general, you know, with people that have worked with him. He kind of comes in, there's a point to his conversation. He can obviously have those moments of just human interaction where he's asking you about you know, your life and getting to know you a little bit, but there's a kind of momentum about him the whole time. You know, that famous Alex Ferguson sort of quote, Manchester United is a train that waits for nobody, and you sort of feel like Erik ten Hag is a little bit like that.
I tell you what, though, you mentioned an Alex Ferguson quote. He doesn't bang on about the history of the club, does he? I mean, you know, he understands it and he obviously respects it, but he doesn't build it into some kind of mythical force.
I think that's a really crucial point, particularly this week when he's been pictured having dinner with Sir Alex Ferguson. And yeah, we've made a little bit of play of it, and I've written about it, particularly in his pre-Newcastle press conference where he trained the focus on the referees, which is, you know, very Fergie-esque. But and he was in the dressing room, he invited him in. He was in the tunnel, you know, giving him a hug. It's a sort of nice moment that Man United have obviously put on social media channels. But there's a respect there, and a sort of deference, but it's never reducing his own status. He's got that aura himself, so it's almost like I'm tapping into that. I totally acknowledge that, but I am also my own person. And maybe this is a little bit unfair on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but at times there was that element to his talking about Sir Alex Ferguson, and I suppose it's different because he had that shared history with him, and he was his boss, the gaffer. Ten Hag won't, I don't think, refer to Sir Alex Ferguson as the gaffer in that in that way. He'll certainly doff his cap to him though, and he understands the history and tradition of the club as well.
Adam.
No, I agree. I think it shows a security in himself, that he's comfortable enough to say, come into the dressing room. I think it helps over time as well. There's, apart from David De Gea and your new colleague, Phil Jones, there are very, very few players there now at the club who actually really know Ferguson. He is just, in the nicest way, the old guy that sits in the stands that did loads when he ran the club.
In the nicest way.
In the nicest way, yeah. So I don't think there is that awkwardness that there would have been if it was David Moyes doing that. So I think it's easier as time goes on to minimise that role but be respectful. Erik ten Hag keeps talking about creating his own history, and I think that's right. I think that's the way Jurgen Klopp went about it at Liverpool, which is, yes, you want to create that atmosphere in the stadium and you want to talk about the history to tap into that, but you don't want to be just sort of always looking back. And you're always looking forward. I think the other person to mention, if you're going to mention Ferguson and the role that he had sort of in the tunnel after the game and going into the dressing room, Richard Arnold was there, and the club has been far better run since he's become chief exec. There is no question on that, and part of that has been bringing the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill a bit more visible, asking for their advice a little bit more, not always taking it, but making them feel involved, recognising what went before, recognising that they know a lot of people, that they've got a lot of experience, that can be quite a healthy thing to do. I know there'll be some Manchester United fans listening to this who are saying, well, Richard Arnold is still the Glazers man. And yeah, he is. Yeah, of course he is. But he's a far better Glazers man than Ed Woodward ever was. And you wonder if the Glazers had actually made a change on Woodward a few years earlier, actually how different Manchester United would have looked.